Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Recently, a political dark horse has emerged in New York's Democratic mayoral primary. 33-year-old Zohran Mamdani. He achieved a landslide victory over former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and is now the Democratic nominee for mayor. Mamdani's campaign platform carries strong socialist overtones, with one of the most controversial proposals being the nationalization of New York City's supermarket system. Under his plan, the government would open and operate grocery stores in order to lower daily living costs through public sector intervention. To many Americans, this might sound like a fresh and progressive idea. But to Chinese people, it's anything but exciting. We've seen this play out before. It's almost identical to the supply and marketing cooperatives, or SAI, that were implemented in China for decades. These cooperatives originated during China's planned economy era and were initially intended to address severe shortages of goods in rural areas. At that time, they served a practical purpose: centralized purchasing and distribution to help farmers in remote regions access basic necessities. However, those so-called advantages are completely irrelevant in today's New York. This is one of the most economically developed and logistically advanced cities in the world. There is no systemic supply shortage. Food deserts do exist in some low-income neighborhoods, but that is a localized issue, not a citywide crisis. Besides, New York already has a robust network of non-profits and food banks providing free meals to those in need. The social safety net is relatively strong. Mamdani's rationale is that the cost of living has skyrocketed since the pandemic, and many people are struggling to afford everyday essentials. But his proposed solution completely misses the point. The cooperative-style model was designed to fix supply issues, not to tackle declining incomes or corporate greed. Poverty doesn't come from a lack of supermarkets. If the government forces its way into the retail sector by opening affordable state-run stores, it will disrupt the entire existing market system. Private businesses will face two choices: slash their prices and fight to compete, or seek political connections and bribe their way into government contracts. Naturally, the latter is cheaper and more effective. Once political power is involved in distribution, rent-seeking and corruption are inevitable. And here's the bigger issue. The government isn't good at retail. It lacks the experience and flexibility needed for efficient operations. Mismanagement, inventory backlogs, and soaring administrative costs are almost guaranteed. These inefficiencies will eventually require ongoing public subsidies to stay afloat. If the city can't balance the books, it's taxpayers who will foot the bill. In simple terms, this is a bloated and inefficient system that uses public money to feed itself. On the surface, these affordable stores may appear to offer lower prices, but in reality, they will crush small local businesses and destroy the diversity of neighborhood economies. The end result? Fewer choices, less competition, worse service. Ordinary people will be the ones who suffer. This isn't social progress, it's a resource misallocation wrapped in utopian packaging. There's an old saying in China: socialism means equalized poverty. It doesn't lead to shared prosperity. It just drags everyone down and concentrates resources in the hands of a few officials. Some people ask, why does socialism seem to work in Nordic countries? In my view, the key difference lies in the prerequisites. Nordic societies have undergone generations of education and cultural shaping, and most citizens share similar standards for material well-being and lifestyle. They're willing to accept a common way of life, but the United States is an immigrant nation, home to people from vastly different economic backgrounds, cultures, and religions. Trying to impose a single government-defined standard on such a diverse population is doomed to fail. Charlie Kirk once posed a sharp question during a debate with a progressive student who supported universal free healthcare. What exactly counts as healthcare? Is going to the ER for a headache considered medical care? How about regular therapy sessions for emotional stress? What if someone needs 3 massages a week just to stay calm? If every taxpayer is forced to fund every individual's subjective interpretation of medical needs, the system will inevitably be abused, resented, and ultimately collapse. The same logic applies to Mamdani's proposed government-run supermarkets. What exactly are essential goods? Bread and milk? Rice and kimchi? Sushi and seaweed? Every ethnic group and culture has different standards. If the government can't meet everyone's expectations, it will be accused of discrimination or exclusion. Eventually, this all-inclusive store will become a battleground for political correctness, cultural representation, and resource entitlement spiraling into chaos. Even worse, Mamdani's plan requires government funding and tax reform, both of which fall far outside the powers of a city mayor. His proposal is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what a mayor can legally or financially do. In other words, it's a fantasy born of overreach. Common prosperity and socialist welfare society may sound nice on paper, but in the real world, they're practically impossible to achieve. Human nature is greedy, diverse, and self-interested. Market economies acknowledge and regulate these differences. Planned economies pretend they don't exist. Mamdani wants to abandon market principles and push New York toward a government-controlled retail model, stripping people of their freedom to choose, while opening the door wide to systemic corruption. The bigger the government's power, the deeper the corruption, and the lower the efficiency. Once the rich flee, the poor get used to dependency, and the government runs out of money. That's when the city truly collapses. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and share. See you in the next one.